Maybe I don't even need the books.
Oh, yeah.
Will you go on the link and see if you can see who's the link?
I was literally about to do that, but I'll have a link.
You need a charger?
Yeah.
Now live on your channel.
Do you want me to unplug it?
No, I just need to. The charger. I don't know. I think it's AB something.
I feel like that's all right. I'm Debbie. I hospital, and we work part of our day. Whenever I talk to him, it's always like, tell me what's going on, baby. How's the baby? That you text our smartphone. And so my son's about to say that.
Oh, really?
And so we were like, hey, well, what's how's the baby? You know, and how's the and how, and so I know you did this, but you were a joy. Every conversation, whenever we talk about work, we always have to say, don't leave yet, because then you know, what's going on? People here, I was like, oh, I don't know about all, but they'll definitely know.
So he was saying he's going and said, I'm not doing stuff this year, and this business is in the middle of that.
You guys are dueling. I told you. I told both of you. They're arguing about who was going to be better. He will. She will. I love her. She had her name tag. And I went back and she had like this picture. And I'm like, you were singing. And we used it. You got that picture up and you're like, this is your that's perfect. I didn't have it's perfect. Right, so everybody's telling me when you get it for work, she's on her phone or the old name. Right, so it's the second floor, right? Yes. Not that you didn't matter, but I'm sorry. Yeah. Yes.
Watch yourself.
Just in case you needed to give it to someone to keep.
That was in the day. See, he's never had to say yes, sir. So you have doubles everything. Right. Right.
Business picture, though, you can tell that, oh, sorry.
Hi. We're gonna speak today. Well, thank you for giving us the opportunity. So you're in Vicky. Yes. So how are you related then? Are you? Okay. What's the difference
See my buddy, that one right there, and my friend, and then
Oh, so that's how I know Nancy. Cause I don't know, there's cable, there's stuff. I was just thinking about how the back of her car, the end that she was driving was like in the candy store. I can open it up, and what do you need, Debbie? It's all candy. It's great to see
how to do that.
like that, they were before I knew her.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's her.
Thank you, my darling.
I know. I'm down here quite often.
Lady that we should remember.
Oh my God.
I know.
You just brought that up.
I'm trying to push the line.
I mean, it was Debbie.
We got to get that last
Where?
That was good.
I'm from just like. His 80s classes. I know she was.
That was a center shop.
I love that picture. I love
They had Santa up on the glass thing, and they went from one building to the other. Mom and dad all just went down there to get the picture made.
It's the cutest picture.
That's the longest driveway in the world until we went by there. Wow, and it's like 4 feet long.
Yeah.
Something. I gotta get in. I gotta get this.
Andy went in the house.
I haven't got to see the video from the attic. She
Yeah.
said that's where you guys use the lock beer.
So mean. So mean.
Yeah, they did. She had Cootie.
That's about the same thing.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, that's my best friend growing up mom, and she worked at Life United. Yeah, I told her about it. I talked to her daughter today, and I don't know if Carolyn knew about this. She knew why we took her away, because Kelsey was actually me. And I guess like Carolyn like it for our school part of the house. So then I was showing her. I don't know. It's
That's how they went on Florida.
I went
We were diving.
You gotta see this picture of me on here. Just wait a second. Nancy was skiing.
What's
Yeah, I used to ski all the time.
I used to ski all the time.
You could ride us in the boat where we were snorkeling with the man.
Get out and do Jesse.
Oh, look at that. Oh, look.
No.
Come here. Bring the chair.
That was my husband's house.
he's now 25, so he used to come and tell me. And
You'll have to get ready to push her forward.
Yeah, she was getting ready to head, yeah, with a turkey leg. She caught a fish. Can you see it? No?
You guys see the picture of Steve?
My husband turned 50, and the three of us.
That's
made him prostitutes. If he comes home and drives up and we're on the porch with the music going and doing. That was on the Florida train. Those two birthdays are 7 days apart, so that was a birthday party.
Connie.
We came by through there.
Oh.
I rode right past my house.
That's so funny. Oh my goodness.
It is unbelievable. You don't even know, there's no contact. You don't even know where you are.
Yeah.
That was Jimmy.
Is it Longaberger?
Yeah.
We were there last week, right?
We went on a trip to Pulaski.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And got the socks.
That's where we were. We went to the sock
Sock
factory.
factory.
Yeah.
Isn't you on the left? That's
Yeah. That's a me. We all had long hair. Oh my gosh, Easter. There's Hop. And,
Yeah.
yeah.
And like those Easter pictures.
Yeah.
That's a good picture.
She's spitting something. What is she doing?
Laughing.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Infectious laugh.
Okay, who's who? Peggy in the middle?
Uh-huh. Connie on one side.
Okay.
Connie had the pink boots. And Nancy was on the other.
You can tell them immediately because all of y'all's thumbs, y'all, when y'all hitchhike, y'all go way far.
They rode the train down. Terry and I drove down with the camper the weekend, during the week before. And then they came down on the train and we met them. And they all stayed in the camper.
Betsy, Nancy, Daddy, Mom, Peggy, and Jimmy. Hey, I got through the group there.
We went down and they, on the Swanee River, and they took us upriver and we just put our snorkeling gear.
Way
And my
down.
sister.
Way down.
Wait, kind of fun.
Yeah, we just held on to the boat or the rope. With the curve. They tried to tell Peggy and I we couldn't talk about the
Nana,
water.
Mimi, Dave, Aunt Marion, Rodney, Nancy, and Jimmy. Oh, they're the dresses. Peggy Church and I were talking about those.
Oh, no.
Yes.
Big.
Oh, honey, we were big hoopers.
Yeah, we were.
Oh, there's the campers.
The campers?
Yes. He made that into something fancy.
That was New Year's Eve.
Look at Andy.
Oh, of course, yeah. 35%.
Where's that? Oh, is he? Oh, okay. Hadn't seen him. Oh, look at Sassy. Whoops.
You know, for that.
Gosh, I don't remember that picture. It's picture you.
I have to write mine down because I need to make sure
Did you want to get the screen?
I think I'm just setting it up so he can speak so that they can see him.
There's nothing to do.
I think that's probably good. And
What I'll do is write it in a message.
About how long is he off? The reason I asked is a friend of ours in Alet, she was gonna watch the streaming, so I was just texting her. Is he about ready?
I think so, yeah, in the next couple of minutes.
Of the service.
Do you guys have it live streaming? Yeah, it's going right now.
Get it on the.
Well, I set it up so that they could see him.
Oh, he's gonna.
That's 37.
Yeah, I did. I watched.
And Nancy, came around and she did that for a fun concert. Just saying,
Yeah, a lot of people when it changes. It's just whoever you want, basically. So the next either Josh or Sue. And the kids.
Oh, yeah, I've seen his Facebook. Evidently they're busy.
Yeah. Do you have your?
Oh, that's.
I mean, this is about as big as you're gonna be able to, yeah.
Oh, that's right.
So,
That's
gonna be the best you can do, yeah.
Yeah.
You might wait, hold on.
So it'll go, right, so they've sent it this way.
Well, they run it for office.
I tell everybody the story, he started already.
He's got land
Yeah, what link were you using to access or to try and
I
access?
was volunteer. I
did.
I mean, like, I was just volunteer, and now he just. And I'm still.
I'll post or have somebody email it to you so that you
He doesn't mean that. He really doesn't. He doesn't.
She's always partying doing something. She always does. You know how she rolls. No, we're talking about Not 5 days.
Let me go to the phone.
Yeah, it just was making that it should be online, the emails were pushing it back to us. We got a next door even.
Peggy made it. Can you make it that time, the Holly?
No, I'm the one that put it up. I put it on.
Chuck who?
I think you can set it, but I think you can set it. Well, we don't really see it.
Yeah, that's why,
My grandmother's house over on Silver. And I'll tell you that drive through, you know, that was 4.5 miles long, it's now like this long.
Hey, if everyone would mind having a seat, service will begin.
Oh, and here's Lassie. Yeah. Hello there. How are you, sweetie? Yeah, I know. I can't believe this. It's not right. Excuse me.
Andrea.
In my new shoes here.
Can you pull up Jerry and
Huh? Oh, they're starting? Yeah.
Oh, thank you. There is no microphone. Can you hear me in the back? Okay. Awesome, thanks. My name is Robin Coward. I worked at Life and Health for about 19 years, and a big number of those, well, the entire time that I was there, Nancy and I worked together. And so I'm really, really pleased to be here, not only for this occasion, but for this occasion to celebrate Nancy's life, because if anybody deserves to celebrate, have her life celebrated, it's Nancy. I'd like to thank Nancy's family, Elwood, Andrea and her family, Bailey, of course, and the others who I just met today. And sorry if I can't catch all the names. But that's all the folks right here. Thank you for allowing me to be here. This is classic Nancy, with the shirts and the decorations and everything. And I'm sure she'd be very, very happy about this. I consider it to be a great honor to just say a few words about Nancy today. And when I first talked with Andrea a few weeks ago, she shared that Nancy had asked her to invite me to speak. Now, I smiled at that because we all know Nancy likes to tease and joke. She mentioned to me previously that she wanted me to say a few words at an event like this, but we didn't know when that event would happen, and we didn't know how it would actually unfold. And so when Andrea talked to me, I knew that Nancy really wasn't kidding. She really did want me to talk at this event, and as I say, I'm happy to be here to do that. Nancy was truly a special friend of mine. I am sure one of the things for those of you who aren't family that are here, you're sharing the tree and the messages about what Nancy meant to you. And then certainly as you talk with the family, I just know from working with bereaved families at Life and Health, I know how important it is to hear those connections And so I really encourage you to do that today, if not just the tree, but personally as well. I mentioned I met Nancy at LifeNet Health. She started, I think it was a year later than I was actually there, or within that next year. Nancy, as you all know, coordinated the community education program for Hampton Roads, and I led the donor family support program for LifeNet Health. So we kind of were joined at the hip, so to speak, because we shared a lot of the volunteers that spoke at some of our events, at our various programs we had throughout Virginia to raise awareness about transplantation. So we worked an awful lot together, coordinating that from time to time. As soon as I met her, I knew that Nancy was the real deal. And what I mean by the real deal is that she literally lived the message of LifeNet Health. That job was not only her occupation, but it was who she was. I mean, it was a perfect job for Nancy. When she reached out to a volunteer, and I know we have a number of volunteers here this afternoon, and then we have some as well on the live stream. When she reached out to talk to a volunteer who was normally an organ or tissue transplant person, or could have been a donor family member as well, she reached out with care and empathy. She was not doing a job, she was being Nancy. Many of you are here today. She asked you because she knew that you would do an incredible job sharing your story. And that story will make a difference in saving and restoring other people's lives as well. She talked a lot about having her angels around her. Being a bit spiritual myself, I think I know what she meant by that, and she was right. All the people who volunteered with her through these years were not only her volunteers, but you became her angels, and the angels for people awaiting transplants. She loved you, and I don't say that lightly. She really loved you for who you were and what you were doing. And to kind of show this kind of connection between the transplant recipient volunteers and Nancy, we have a letter that I was going to read now from a couple folks connected with our volunteer program. And this is, we have, how many people do we have on the live stream?
Like 30 something, yeah.
We have 30 some people on the live stream. It's just hard for transplant recipients to consider given our times. I'm sure 3 times that many at least would want to be here. But this is from a letter from a woman named Daveline, who I know well, Daveline, and I think she's on the live stream, and Dr. LaFrancis Rogers Rose. They had sent in a letter, and they really like to have it read, so I'm going to do that now. We extend our heartfelt condolences to each of you today. This is to Nancy's family. It's truly hard to put into words what Nancy was to each of us. Nevertheless, we feel the love to share a few thoughts on our Nancy. For more than 20 years, Nancy was that solid rock for so many of us. From your first meeting, she made you feel so loved. There was nothing she wouldn't do for any members of the transplant community. She supported us, and she supported our families. She was compassionate about her work in the community. She loved people, and people loved her. There was no project, big or small, that she didn't master. She was a true advocate for community outreaching. There is no other person who brought organ donor awareness to the African American community than our sister Nancy. We were blessed to share a special bond and many memorable moments with Nancy in our own way. She indeed will be truly missed. We will forever hold Nancy in our hearts. You've earned your wings. We know that you're with your best friend, Catherine Lamb, number 37, heart transplant recipient. She worked with Catherine for many, many years. Rest well, our sister. You've earned your wings. Heartfelt love, Marilyn D. Grant, sister of the late Estelle Fields, transplant recipient number 26. Daveline Perry, cousin of Catherine Lamb, heart transplant recipient number 37. And Dr. LaFrancis Rogers Rose, heart transplant recipient number in 2002. I think that's it. So you can see where I was going with this conversation is exactly where these volunteers, they're more than volunteers, they're part of Nancy's family. I hope you can respect that. And I'll just finish up a little bit about my story with Nancy. After my retirement from Life Net Health about 4 years ago, I continued to stay in touch with Nancy. You know, Nancy and I had at least two things in common: eating and baseball. Things. But we both love to eat and we both love baseball. We had lots of lunches together over those 4 years. We caught up mainly with each other's grandchildren, understanding about how the grandchildren are doing. So Bailey, Nancy's granddaughter, I may know a lot more about you than you really think I do.
Probably.
And she got to hear about all my grandchildren and see some of their pictures. And that was, of course, until lunch came. And then came our second thing together, so everything stopped. We stopped talking about grandchildren and we started eating. We also went to a good number of the Norfolk Tides baseball games together. Occasionally, they had Life and Health events at the games, so I saw her then. But we also got together independently for games. Sometimes she brought along a transplant recipient volunteer or another friend, and we enjoyed the baseball game together. It didn't really matter. I say it really didn't matter how hot it was. We used to go to some of those day games, and it was so hot at Harbor Park, we couldn't stand it. We actually were strong baseball fans, but sometimes we had to retreat to the shade where we got some ice cream or some beer or a little of both. You know, Nancy's face, I can remember it to this day. Her face was beet red in that sun. I mean, she was so hot, I thought she was going to explode or something. So I actually made her go get in the shade. But she never complained about that. Never. And you know the popular phrase, no worries? Nancy could have invented that phrase. I talked to Nancy on the phone earlier this year, and we talked for a long time. We were in the coronavirus lockdown, and being as ill as she wasn't going anywhere, but I did not hear her complain at all. She talked about Andrea and her driving to the house that she used to live in, which was not too far from the house I live in Norfolk. And it was for sale. So of course Nancy had to go in, which she did with Andrea. And Andrea tells me they took a picture in front of the fireplace, which was kind of legendary in that house. And that really brought back a number of wonderful memories from her, because she really enjoyed talking about it on the phone. And we talked about churches being closed, because she knew I was close to the church. But she told me she went to church one Sunday. So that kind of confused me for a while, until she shared that, well, it's actually the church like across the street or down the road from her house where she was. And then Andrea confirmed that, and she had asked, well, you said, you want to go to church today? And Nancy was confused, but said, sure, can I wear my pajamas? And they said, sure you can. And so Nancy was escorted to the front steps and sat to hear the service that was going on across the street, apparently. She particularly loved hearing the folks singing, and she said, rockin' to the hymns, rockin' to the hymns. And on the phone, she laughed and laughed, and it must have gone on for a minute or two, laughing about that story. And if any of you know Nancy, that laugh That laugh will stay in my head for the rest of my life. I will not forget it. But suddenly, she stopped laughing, and everything got very quiet. And it was like she was thinking very deeply of what was next for her. I became a commissioned pastor of the Presbyterian Church after I left Life and Health, and I actually invited Nancy, and she came to my commissioning service there. And I believe I know what was next for Nancy. She is celebrating joy every day. Andrea's given me approval to be able to read 2 Bible passages. Reading from the book of 1 John in the Bible, chapter 4, verse 12 and verse 21. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is made complete in us. And verse 21 reads, anyone who loves God must also love their brother and sister. Folks, everybody here, and everybody on live stream, and everybody that would have wanted to be here but couldn't be, you are Nancy's brothers and sisters, and Nancy loved you. I hope each of you celebrate her life and your relationship with her. I know I will. The beauty of having such a friendship as this, is that we have the joy of remembering people like Nancy. As I mourn her loss, I know Nancy is now at peace. I will miss her tremendously, but she will remain in my memories as one of the finest people I've ever met. Thank you for listening. I think we're going to have some remarks from Debbie Anderson from Children's Hospital of King's Daughters.
Robin, thank you. Your words were perfect, and I know Nancy would have been very humbled to hear them from you. Many of us now feel like we're living in a bubble, either because we were told to or because we chose to. And life is uncertain for many of us and uncomfortable in this isolation. But Nancy drew me out of my bubble, and I will forever be indebted to her. As Robin said, I am a nurse practitioner at Children's Hospital of the King's Daughters, and I met Nancy as a brand new heart transplant coordinator almost 30 years ago next month. We didn't talk every day, we didn't see each other every week, but whenever I saw Nancy, no time had passed. Nancy was serving many functions at the time I met her at Sentara. I really don't know what her job title was, but she did a lot of stuff. And I know that those of you that giggle understand that. She served as an advocate for her patients that were waiting, as well as the recipients, and she linked them to needed resources, whether they were financial, whether it was community assistance, and often it was just to each other. So she was a sort of a social worker extraordinaire, and she was to me as well. She was the cheerleader, she was the ringleader for the transplant games. The patients she met during this time, as Robin shared with us, fueled her passion for donation and transplantation as each story became personal. And as Robin said, each person became beloved to her. She sought to educate anyone who would listen about the power of the gift of new life. Prior to meeting Nancy, most of my patients were infants, a couple toddlers, and then a spirited young teenager who may be live streaming with us now came into our program, and she had questions, and a lot of questions. And I couldn't answer them. I was the transplant coordinator. I didn't live the life. I didn't walk the path of what it feels like to be in a hospital bed waiting, what it feels like to go to the OR, what it feels like to wake up. Nancy was able to connect this patient with other patients to say, hey, this is it. This is the real deal. This is what life can be like. She gave them hope. And I think that if we look at LifeNet's message and we look at the message of donation and transplant, hope is what defines us, and it is what Nancy gave to us. So she was able to introduce me to adults who would walk the walk, had similar fears, and could give living proof of a happy ending. And thus our partnership began. She drew me out of my bubble, outside of KD, to see, yes, this is out in the real world. My patients found affirmation with the connections that were made through Nancy, and in later years they became volunteers, eager to spread their gratitude and the story of their life-changing gift of organ donation in their very young lives. She came to our picnics, she came to our memorials. Nancy was very much embedded, never said no. Hey Nancy, can you meet me for a picture? Hey Nancy, can you give us some brochures? And we have a patient who wants to do her senior presentation on donation. And even my son, who wanted to do a project both in high school and college, she was able to, yes, I can give you things that you can have them share. And sure enough, we got some kids to sign up. And who celebrated with me? No one more than Nancy. So when she began her life's work at LifeNet, going from Centera, it was truly an extension of her previous years. She rejoiced with me when our children received their call for a transplant. She danced in the streets in the Doodah Parade, and if you know what the Doodah Parade is, it was unlike anything else. I had never heard of it before, but with Nancy, you couldn't say no, so it's like, okay, I'll show up, we'll dance in the streets with the kids, and we dressed up like kidneys and hearts, and we had fun. We stood at donor tables in steamy weather and stormy skies. We were in Richmond, we were on the boardwalk, the Neptune Festival, and in many hospital lobbies, and there was Nancy. If I didn't have people show up, I always knew I had Nancy. As a member of Donate Life Virginia, we fought over deliveries to the DMV because it was part of our mission to distribute educational materials to the DMV. So Nancy was in the same territory, but Nancy didn't want me to take her DMVs. She wanted to go to the DMV, those were her people. So we would say, okay, well, we'll go into the DMV together and give them things, and of course then they had to like me for lunch. But they were her people, as Robin has said. There was not a stranger, and even if it was the security guard at the DMV, she wanted to empower them with the same knowledge and the same education that she was giving to everyone. For Nancy, as Robin has said too, there's sort of a theme here, it was more than a job. She attended our hospital's annual donor event in which we honored our children in the tribute garden. Families were drawn to her quiet strength. She wept with them and with me. To Nancy's family, I grieve for and with you. I am a better transplant coordinator because of Nancy. She was my safe place. She understood my despair and my weariness, and she renewed my spirit. To LifeNet, thank you. Thank you for supporting a dedicated professional that served with passion every day in our community. And for many in our hospitals and some of our donor families and recipients in the community, the DMV, Nancy was LifeNet. She was the face of LifeNet. LifeNet was a building, LifeNet was a name. When they thought of a person, they thought of Nancy's face, Nancy's smile, Nancy's energy. LifeNet, she represented your mission with goodness, with kindness, with professionalism, and with grace. There's a children's book, okay, I'm in pediatrics, I always gotta talk about the kids. But there's a children's book entitled Badger's Parting Gifts. And it tells the story of a group of animals that are feeling overwhelmed by the loss of their friend, the badger. In time, though, they learned that whenever someone would recall something about Badger, it made them smile. In the book, it talks about how Frog found confidence to ice skate, and the fox learned how to tie his necktie, and the rabbit learned how to make gingerbread cookies. And whenever they thought of something Badger had taught them, it was a gift. It was a gift to treasure. It was a parting gift that would become more special each time they remembered it or each time they passed it on. So today I would say, what are Nancy's parting gifts to us? Is it to appreciate the feel of the sand between your toes when you go to the Outer Banks? Is it her famous eye roll with those gorgeous, gorgeous eyes? Is it her love of Jimmy Buffett music? Is it her laugh? Is it her ability to listen without judging? her ability to make a connection so that no one was a stranger. As we think of all these very precious things that Nancy gave to us, she continues to be part of our journey. She remains at our side, she remains in our hearts, and we are not alone. She is with us still. Thank you for letting me celebrate Nancy with you.
I think that's it, everybody.
I want to say something.
Okay.
Here we go. I'm not gonna be long. Nancy and I started the first grade together
Yeah.
and got out of high school. She was probably ahead of me for some reason. I don't know what. But she was such a special person that everybody didn't do her. Years ago, I know you can't believe this, but I probably had a drinking problem and a wife problem. And if it wasn't for Nancy, I'd have never made it through it. Nancy and Andrea, I remember coming out in the middle of the night where I was in a single car accident drunk and taking me home and taking care of me and stuff like that. But Nancy was always around when you needed her. My family's from West Virginia, and every year I'd have to take my mother or my grandmother up to the mountains and drop them off for a few weeks with their family and then come back. Well, I had two friends that would go with me, and we played golf, spend the night up there, play golf, come back. Well, they canceled that on me in the last minute. So I picked up the phone and called Nancy. I said, "Hey, Nancy, I'm going to West Virginia morning. You go?" Sure. She jumped right in. So we drive up there. It's probably a 6-hour drive to where we were going. And we had my grandmother. We dropped my grandmother up and started down the road. All of a sudden, Nancy goes, "Stop, stop." Like, what? She said, "Pull over." Like, what? She said, "I'm taking this bra off." I'm like, what? I had a van. She climbs in the back and she goes, "Pulling it over there." I'm like, what? She goes, "I'm getting a 6-pack of beer."
It's Nancy.
So I hadn't seen Nancy in years, but I remember for a long time, and Dwight probably verified too, Nancy, when she wasn't working or anything, she probably had beer in her hand. But we ended up spending the night up there and having a good time and partying. And that's just the way Nancy was. That's the way I want to remember her, as a friend and having a good time and partying. The whole Agnew family. Thanks.
You were supposed to go now, girl. Oh, I didn't see Dwight over there.
Yeah, anybody who's beer, wine, and soda, if y'all want to go to the canteen and get some, you just need to sign in. I'm a member here, or remember the VFW out in Fallbrook, California. I'm her cause no, she's my aunt, like Betsy here and my mom. But like Tommy said, she was like that. Hell, I came back from Desert Storm, and my mom didn't even know it. It was a surprise. Supposed to fly into Norfolk, and the plane got diverted because of fog. So it landed in some little hole in the wall airport out here.
Newport News.
Yeah, it was probably Newport News, I think it was, Betsy. So Andrea and Nancy drove down there, and then we drove to Ayla to my mom's house to have a party. They had already set up with her that this party was going to go on. Well, Nancy had the secret that I was flying in. My mom didn't know it, so they picked me up. And then I think you guys were going there because y'all were living somewhere else. Had to drive down to Virginia to Norfolk to pick me up, and then you had to drive to Newport News, whatever it was, and then take up. That's the type of person Nancy was. You just give her an inch, and she'd take a mile with it. She was a good lady.
Yeah, she sure was.
I'm gonna miss her.
Two paper.
Well, thank you guys so much for speaking, Rob and Debbie and Tommy and Kitty. I think now we'll just do some celebrating and.
You come up here and talk, so they'll see.
Yeah, that's okay. Trying to refer it.
Come on, girl.
Jim wanted everybody to know over here is, beer, wine, and sodas are available. You just sign in. There's a clipboard right when you walk in. And then there are refreshments back here, sandwiches, individually wrapped, and chips and things. So have at it.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out.
All right, lead technician, turn off the music.
Okay.
Say
Oh,
what?
no.
Now,
Got my camera. We'll take some pictures. It's the same place. Sitting on that rock sidewalk. And I was looking at it. I got a picture somewhere of the three of us sitting there. Plaids.
Yeah.
I just had pictures of
I told Terry I would say hi.
Is it still streaming?
Terry.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure there's, well, at one time. I don't remember that. I went down and you were all, they got something. I think all that's there. Right, well,